guys, this evening we're going to continue our series on living God's story, and this evening we're going to be looking at the Bible character of Joshua. Joshua was a leader of Israel after Moses, so he was Moses' assistant when Moses led Israel. You probably remember who Moses is. He was the leader of Israel who led the Israelites out of Egypt, and if anyone's seen the movie The Prince of Egypt, which I would thoroughly recommend if you haven't, that's about Moses. It's a great film and it's on Netflix, so if you want to watch it, would definitely recommend. Moses led the people out of Egypt, but Joshua was tasked with leading the people into the promised land. And one of the defining characteristics that we see in Joshua and in his life was his trust in God. Throughout his leadership and even before Moses' death, he was defined by his trust in God rather than in his own abilities. So let's have a look at Joshua's life. Now, when the Israelites were getting near to the promised land, they sent in a load of scouts to have a look at it. And here I'm going to take a little bit of scripture from Numbers 14, verses 6 to 9, which was when they'd returned from there and all of the other Israelites were terrified. But Joshua and another guy, Caleb, came back and gave a favourable report. It says here in Numbers 14, that Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." Now, while the other Israelites feared because they did not think they were strong enough to defeat the people who were already in the land, Joshua trusted in God's strength. Like the other Israelites, sometimes we find ourselves in situations where what we need to do seems impossible for us. But when we remember that God is with us, like Joshua did, we remember that we are not alone and that God is our strength. When Moses died, Joshua had been chosen by Moses and by God to be the next leader of Israel. And these are just some words that God spoke to Joshua when he became the leader of Israel. And this is taken from Joshua 1, verses 1 to 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua son of Nun, Moses' assistant, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and these people, get ready to cross the river Jordan into the land I am about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to give to their ancestors. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Now, we are commanded here by God to be strong and courageous because God is with us. I imagine after Moses had died, Joshua probably felt like there was a pretty big pair of shoes to fill. Moses had led the people out of Egypt. He had been used by God in so many amazing miracles like the parting of the sea and the manna from heaven, and he had brought the Israelites the laws from God, the 10 Commandments, and all of those massive, long and slightly boring books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy. But God reminded Joshua that he was not alone. He had God on his side. The people crossed the Jordan safely. With an amazing miracle, God dried up the river so that they could cross it safely on dry land. And then he restored the water. He didn't leave it dry. And Joshua recognised that it was God who was in control and that it was by God's power that saved the Israelites from their enemies. You probably remember the story of the defeat of Jericho, when the Israelites marched around the city with trumpets for 7 days and the walls fell down and they defeated it. Now, this little bit that I'm going to read here happened just before Jericho, and you can find it in Joshua 6, verses 13 to 15. Now, when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us, or are you for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence, and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. In this little scene, Joshua meets with God, and he falls face down before him. Now, God has come to meet Joshua just before he carries out this task that God has given him to do, which is the task of leading the Israelites to victory at Jericho. And by God's coming to him, Joshua was receiving a confirmation that this was what he was supposed to be doing. It might have been easy, considering his authority and his status, the fact that God had called him to do this amazing, to carry out this amazing thing, to bring the Israelites into victory. Joshua might have found it really easy to take the honour and the glory for himself, to say, actually, he was the powerful one, he was the one that was going to achieve this by himself. But instead, he recognised God's authority, and he understood that it was God's power that would bring the victory. He humbled himself before God, and he trusted in him, in God, to carry out the victory, and not only in his own strength. So I have some questions for you. How do you think Joshua felt when he met with God in this way? And do you think that God is with you? How would it make you feel to know that God would never leave or forsake you, and that he is helping you? And thirdly, how can we give God the glory for his victories in our lives?